I'm Becky from Moving Pictures, and we are going to be covering how to create a soft smoky eye. So this is purely just to define Abby's eye, give it a little bit of structure and a bit of shape so it doesn't disappear. Day to day you want your eyes to stand out just that little bit more, so having a little bit of definition with a little bit of eyeshadow, quite a natural tone, will just make such a difference. So we're going to focus in on having a really nude brown. Abby's skin tone is like a medium intensity. She's not fair, she's definitely not obviously a darker skin tone, so it's definitely a medium skin tone. So we don't need to go too dark, but we don't want to go so light that it's not visible. So I'm just using a really fluffy brush for this, getting enough product on the brush so we can work into the skin. So we're going to start on the outside of Abby's eye. Where basically the last lash finishes is where you want to put your brush initially, and we're doing really light circular motions for this. The key is really light pressure, and if you hold your brush at the end rather than right down near the tip of the brush, you get a lot more flexibility. It really restricts you when you hold it near the end, and you can only use your fingers to actually move the brush, whereas if you hold it near the end you can use your wrist motion, you can use a little bit more kind of a flexible effect on it really. So I'm just buffing it right on the outside of Abby's eye. Always going inward, I never want to bring it outward. You really want to stick to the furthest point being the last lash. The reason for this is it will instantly make your eye look heavier if you wing it out too far, especially when you're trying to make your eyes look a little bit bigger and define them. And we're not going to go too high either. The purpose of this is to just keep it really tight into Abby's crease, and obviously you can see here the light's playing in our favour. You can see her natural shadow created just there. We're just focusing directly in that area. So we're not going anywhere near the other half of Abby's eye, we're just keeping it on the outer half. And there we go. So if I get you to open for me, instantly that's just created a bit more depth on the outside of Abby's eye, which is instantly going to make the centre part of her eye stand out a little bit more, so they look a bit bigger and a bit more defined. So if you close again. Now all I'm doing with what's left on the brush is just buffing the edges, making sure it's nice and blended. I'm not going to do too much with it, but just to make sure it's all soft and blended. Next I'm going to add a slightly darker shade, just to create a little bit more definition. And this one I'm going in with is, let's go for a slight shimmer. So I'm going for this one here. It's got an ever so slight soft sheen to it. It's not a shimmer, it's more like a satin, so it's not going to look too harsh on Abby's skin. And we're using a slightly smaller, fluffier brush, so that was my first one, tiny little bit bigger, and my second one here that I'm going to use is a tiny little bit smaller. Same flexibility as the first one though, so it's nice and fluffy, it's going to create a nice blended finish. If you use a brush that's quite firm and doesn't have much flexibility to it, you won't get a nice soft blend. So it's really important to always use a fluffy brush when you're wanting to create a nice smoky eye. Exactly the same as I did initially, I'm just keeping it restricted to that one area and just enhancing that depth. And then I'm going in with my first brush that I used, the fluffier one, again just to give it a little bit more of a blended effect. And then if you open for me. So there we go, that's just created a really nice soft smoky eye. Just wanted to define Abby's eyes a little bit more, make them look a little bit bigger. You can see when she looks straight ahead, it doesn't go too high over her crease, so when she opens, it doesn't look heavy and bring her eyes down. So if I get to close again, I'm just going to make sure it's all blended. Then what I would recommend to do, again just to create a little bit more definition, using a slightly darker shade just to create a bit more of almost a framed eye really. Just using a very short stubby brush. This doesn't have much flexibility at all to it. We're going to just stamp this along Abby's lash line. I'm using a brown shade for this, again to keep it nice and soft. We don't want it to be too heavy. But it's a really lovely way of defining the eyes, making the lashes look fuller as well, but without it being heavy. Same again, just underneath the eye. This is something a lot of people are scared of doing, but I would say just keep it really far out. Never bring it too far into the inner corner of the eye, and you can't go wrong. The further out you keep it, the better, because it can look quite heavy if you bring it right the way along. So if I get to look up for me. So for Abby, I'm just literally pushing it right into the root of her lashes. The closer to the lash line, the better for this. You don't want to keep it low, you want to keep it really tight up under the lashes. Otherwise it looks really heavy and it doesn't look as natural as it could be. So there we go, I've just gone about half the way over on Abby, just to frame the eyes and make them look bigger. And what we'll do is finish that off with a little bit of mascara. And I'm only doing one eye at the moment, just so you can purely see the difference, going from our base, how we prepped the eye, to having a really soft, natural but defining smoky eye. So I'm just using a disposable wand on Abby just for hygiene purposes. I need to look down for me. Amazing, isn't it? Okay, and then if I get you to look slightly higher for me. There we go. So the purpose of having a little bit of a liner along the lash line, as I said, will help create the lashes to look a little bit fuller and make the eye look bigger. So you can really see the difference of how much bigger Abby's eye looks on this side compared to the base on its own. So I have created a really lovely natural smoky eye on Abby just to create a little bit of definition. On our next video we're going to be focusing on defining that a little bit more, creating a slightly darker smoky eye. So yeah, I'm Becky Howie and this is Moving Pictures.